The fate of Lyndon Johnson did haunt Richard Nixon. He felt he had to demonstrate that most Americans still supported him and that it would not benefit Hanoi to stall peace negotiations. Don't get rattled. Don't waver. Don't react, he told himself as he went to work on a speech to respond to the protests. Insisting on writing it himself, he distinguished his supporters, the forgotten Americans, from the vocal minority in the streets with a new catchphrase.
The great silent majority of my fellow Americans, I ask for your support. For the more divided we are at home, the less likely the enemy is to negotiate at Paris. Let us be united for peace. Let us also be united against defeat. Because let us understand, North Vietnam cannot defeat or humiliate the United States. Only Americans can do that.
It was the most effective speech of Nixon's presidency. 80,000 telegrams and letters arrived at the White House. Nearly all supported him. His approval rating soared. But the war continued, and with it the protests.
What happened here at Kent State University 50 years ago defined an age.
The guards were opening fire on the students.
67 shots. At an anti-Vietnam War protest, 4 dead, 9 injured.
I've never been able to just completely forget it.
Student photographer Howard Ruffner was on the Hill that day. His pictures soon appeared in Life magazine, including this dramatic cover.
I didn't know if he was alive or dead. You look at him, he doesn't look like he's going to live.
The young man fighting for his life, freshman John Cleary, was shot walking to class.
I was shot in the chest, 1 or 2 inches in one direction, I wouldn't be here.
Events that penned an anthem by singer Neil Young. Polls at the time showed most Americans blamed the demonstrators, not the guard.
It's such a juxtaposition.
John Cleary has spent his life moving beyond it.
It's a snapshot of one moment of time, and I didn't want that to define me.
Today on campus, scars, bullet holes, markers for the dead.
How do you feel standing here now, looking at this spot? You get shivers.
As Kent State prepares to mark the anniversary, Howard and John meet for the first time.
Pleasure to finally meet you because
New bonds from the darkest of days. Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Kent State University.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel.
we on our own. That summer I hear the drumming, forget you know I know. Gotta get down to it, so we can turn this round. Looking down on the road. Wanna get you running round and get on the ground. How can you run when it's slow?
Okay. Well, hi. All right. So we have our short class today, and so I don't forget, let me remind you, your midterms are due tomorrow, and I'll put a grade on them, and maybe one or two words, but not much more, since I put a lot of words in the comments on the drafts. And we have a debate today where the student, Anish Moose, is going to participate along with me in the debate. So we want to make sure we have enough time for that. And so let me go back to the lesson plan for the class to remind myself what we need to talk about here. And I think that's the lesson plan. Yes, so there you can see. It's on public opinion at home and abroad. And so to get us moving here, or thinking about this, I want to go to an exercise just so we can, well, again, we'll just do the debate. I think that's what's next, but all right, so well, let me open up the notes, public, chapter 7, public opinion at home and abroad. Let's open those notes as well. And there you can see. So social movements, of course, you saw the social movements, including the anti-war movement in the United States, that was led primarily, but not only by students and young people, and on college campuses, a lot of places on college campuses. And the Kent State, May 4th, 1970, shootings by the American militia, American National Reserve military units called out by the governor at the time, were to put down rebellion in the Kent State University area in response to an announcement by Richard Nixon that he was sending the US military, US Army to invade into Cambodia in 1970, because I don't have a map of Korea, a map of Vietnam right here, right now, but of course you know that Cambodia has a border with Vietnam, and the communist nationalist forces that were fighting against the South Vietnamese army were supplied and traveling through, and were supplied through Cambodia. So that was the argument or the justification for Nixon's expansion of the war openly by sending the US Army to Cambodia. Of course, the US has been bombing, dropping lots of bombs in Cambodia from the Air Force, but he officially sent the US Army and the South Vietnamese Army into Cambodia. And that was an expansion, open expansion of the war in a public way, which probably better to make it public since it was going on privately or secretly anyway. And that led to this the explosion of protests, including the anti-war social movement protests. And the protesters started to turn violent. Somebody burned down the ROTC building. The ROTC building, ROTC is the Reserve Officer Training Corps program. That's the program whereby college students can enroll in college and get tuition with the promise that they are going to become officers in the military after they finish their college degree. So you see, there's a lot of ROTC advertisements here at Catholic University of Korea, because of course South Korea's adopted that model from the US. They even call it ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps. So somebody burned down the ROTC building at Kent State the night before those protests on May 3rd. All of the universities in the US, the big universities, have an ROTC program, and including a building where the ROTC program is located. And that weekend of in early May, the ROTC building was burned down in Kent, Ohio. And the governor of Ohio at the time, a Republican governor by the name of Jim Rhodes, sent in the Ohio National Guard and to police the campus and police the area to stop what he considered to be riots and property destruction. And they were moving to stop the student demonstrations on the college campus at Kent State. And we still don't know what happened. People become very emotional and unable to change their views on these issues. But somehow the military soldiers in the Ohio National Guard at Kent State on May 4th, 1970, got live ammunition in their guns. And somehow they fired those guns and they killed 4 college students at Kent State. I don't think they were even involved in the protest. That one person who was wounded, he was just walking to class and a stray bullet hit him. And that's close to my home. That's only about 45 minutes by car from my home. My sister graduated from Kent State, so I'm up there quite a bit at the college campus and see the signs commemorating the Kent State protests. But you saw, as I mentioned in previous classes, that was in May 4, 1970. In 1972, Richard Nixon won re-election in a landslide in November 1972, despite all the protests and the anger. You saw the speech by Richard Nixon in 1969, calling upon Americans to be unified and condemning those protesters. He's saying North Vietnam cannot defeat or humiliate the United States. Only Americans can do that. In other words, those college protesters, those anti-war protesters who were appearing to undermine the support for the Nixon administration in its negotiations, including using deadly force with the Vietnamese government, the North Vietnamese government, by portraying America as divided and lacking the will and determination necessary to impose its will, and thereby undermining the ability of the United States to negotiate a peace with honor. That was another phrase that Nixon used in his speeches to the American public. We will have peace with honor. In other words, we will look like we were not defeated. We will not look like we were defeated in Vietnam. So, and so what is the relationship to public opinion polls and surveys, and how much those influence American policymakers? And but before I do that, I want to make sure that we do the attendance for the class. So let me do this screen share and go back to the cyber campus here first and go to the right class, American Foreign Policy attendance. So make sure that, let me go back to screen share and here and week 9 and add and smart attendance. And your number is 252. 252 is your smart attendance number. So let me go to the chat, 252, and that's your number. And you can put that number in. And so let's go to the debate. And so let me go back to the screen share of the lesson plan. And I think, no, that's not the lesson plan. Is that, no, not that. What about this there? I think there's the lesson plan. Okay, so to South Koreans, public opinion surveys are important in determining US foreign policy. So I will be pro in this exercise. And so let me set my my smartphone clock timer and timer. And so I speak for 6 minutes. Then Khan will speak for 6 minutes. And then I will, as pro, rebut for 4 minutes maximum. And then Khan can rebut and conclude for up to 7 minutes maximum. And then pro has the last word for 3 minutes. So I have a question for Anais. Anais, do you have a PowerPoint presentation or a some kind of audio visual element that you want to show with us? Do you want me to share? You want to share screen to show to everybody else?
Yes, I have a presentation.
Great, great. Okay, so you want to go ahead, open it up now so that I can see it, so we get it set up so it works, okay? Can you open it up and I'll share screen with multiple participants can share simultaneously. Okay, so I have opened up multiple participants. So can you open up your presentation and then hit share screen so we can see it? I just want to make sure it works before we start. So click on share screen. I've enabled it. You should be able to do that.
Yes, I just need to change my settings to allow it.
And while she's doing that, we can go ahead and start since I'm pro. And so I, of course, I'm not going to have to share anything else than what I'm already showing you. So I can just go back to the lesson plan. So to South Koreans, public opinion surveys are important in determining U.S. foreign policy. Okay, so I'm pro, and keep in mind, you're going to vote on who won the debate, and then grade the debate, the quality of the debate after the end of the debate. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to use my smartphone as a timer. So it is now going. So, okay. So of course, I think public opinion surveys are important in determining U.S. foreign policy. As I mentioned, politicians, professional politicians, they want to keep their job. They want to keep their job as elected politicians. That means they have to win election and win re-election. And when you look at the behavior of American politicians, they do professional politicians in the 21st century, they are pretty effective, fairly effective in doing what they think is necessary in order to keep their jobs, getting reelected. I mean, when a president doesn't get reelected, it is an unusual event. So when Donald Trump failed to get reelected in 2020, it was, in a way, it was surprising. If you had asked me if he was going to be reelected in January 2020, before the pandemic started, I probably would have said he was more likely going to get reelected than not. Typically, there has to be a crisis, a perceived national crisis to prevent a president from getting reelected. And in the case of George H.W. Bush in 1992, why he lost to Bill Clinton, was that a crisis? Well, it was coming off of a crisis, the Iraq War, the first war with Saddam Hussein when he occupied Kuwait. And the Americans reacted against George H.W. Bush because George H.W. Bush did not appear to be paying enough attention to domestic affairs in the view of Americans. And so, in a sense, that international crisis boosted George H.W. Bush's popularity because when the war, the final phase of the war against Saddam Hussein began in spring 1991, George H.W. Bush was incredibly popular according to public opinion surveys. But that's a critical point. Public opinion surveys are fickle. They are changeable because Americans' views and opinions are very changeable because, as you pointed out in your essays, in your paragraphs, Americans don't pay close attention. Generally speaking, most Americans do not pay very close attention to foreign affairs. But they still can have emotional responses to foreign affairs, like during a crisis. And a good politician, an effective politician, knows everything that I just stated. But at the same time, American politicians, professional politicians, are always trying to understand what the American people want and what they think they want and what they will want tomorrow. And how will they act? How will these professional politicians, including presidents, act in order to in order to have a positive evaluation of those voters, enough voters to win elections when it's time to have an election. And that means, of course, they know that American public opinion views are, particularly on foreign policy, are quite changeable. But the question is, are politicians, are public opinion surveys important in shaping and determining US foreign policy? And if Americans are primarily concerned about domestic affairs, okay, that's something as reflected in public opinion surveys that will affect American behavior in foreign policy. It will tell you that an American president has to make sure that his domestic public policy efforts or domestic public policy legitimation claims and efforts are understood in ways which reflect the fact that Americans do not pay close attention to foreign policy unless the Americans are convinced that there is a terrible threat. That was emphasized in the readings for this week, right? That Americans tend to pay attention to foreign policy when they think there's an enemy, a serious, dangerous enemy outside the United States. And that can be silly, it can be overdone. But for example, Kim Jong-un has got nuclear weapons. Oh my gosh, Americans might know about that. But if you're Joe Biden, who's trying to get through a domestic reform policies in the American Congress to be passed by the US Congress, you might well be predisposed to explain your American foreign policy, American domestic policy program in terms of American competitiveness, American competition with China, making America strong against America's adversaries. And he just did that today. I mean, I was listening to the radio this morning, and Joe Biden said this Build Back Better program of the United States government to increase support for children, to increase support for medical care for the United States is necessary, not just to be nice to poor people, but to make America competitive. Competitive with who? With China, with the rest of the world. So again, you see that public opinion surveys are important for affecting American foreign policy, because American presidents will do whatever is necessary in order to get reelected. And that includes, they will do whatever is necessary in US foreign policy to get reelected. And they will, and they know that public opinion surveys will reflect the changeability of American views on those issues. So that's why I have to stop. And so I will turn over the share screen to Anais. So Anais, share your screen, please. Okay, so you can start.
Okay. So while I agree that the public opinion is important when they do feel strong emotion, I would like to mention that 80% of the American population is actually part of the mass public. So there are people without or very little knowledge on foreign policies, as most of them didn't learn about it in school. So as a result, they are not interested in it, or if they are, well, they can only learn about it through news media or interest groups, which are both topics I'm gonna talk about next. And most of the time, they don't react strongly unless it affects their daily life, which can be affected to domestic policies. And the other time they actually do react is when they are touched by nationalism values. So it has to be something grand, like a feeling of identity threat or influence. So most of the time it includes war, which is not a day-to-day foreign policy matter. And it is when the government starts paying real attention to them for, as you said, to ensure they would get re-elected. But however, it takes time for the public to react because they don't feel it in their day-to-day life. So the government needs to act before actually getting reaction from the public. And once they get a negative reaction from the public, they would then need to fix what they have done. So finally, they also have a lot of trust in the government, with over 64% of the citizens having trust in the government, as I said. And they believe that the leaders should know what to do and how to act for the country for them, because they are in the high positions. And it's also important to mention that the president is the human embodiment of public's feeling, of people's feeling, which leads me to my next point. They are easy to manipulate for the officials. So first of all, officials include elites. So this elites is only the top 5% of the pyramid. They are well informed and they are listened to by the mass and attentive public. So they have influence not only over the public, but also influence over the news media. Indeed, there is a low percentage of neutral media in the United States. So as they can control the news media, they can control which information the public has access to. And of course, it would be information that is in favor of the actual president. And lastly, the government is always feeding the public and the citizens with the American dream. And actually, following a survey by YouGov America, it has been found that over 50% of the US citizens believe that the American dream is attainable, no matter the person's background. And they believe it because the government is always feeding them with the grandeur of America and the grandeur of American companies such as Apple, Amazon. But in reality, there are very few that can attain the American dream. So now I would like to give a bit more insights using the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So using it as the country as a whole, not as an individual. So I'm taking the example of Bush next. So the bottom level needs to be fulfilled for re-elections. So physiological needs, and it is the actually domestic policies, yes. And then the safety needs is both domestic and foreign. And it is actually when the elected leader is a servant. And as you go higher up in the ladder, the president or leader actually start to become master as they have more freedom, because the citizens are contented with the lowest part of the ladder. And so taking George W. Bush president as an example, he had lower approval ratings during most of his presidency, as the bottom ladder was not fulfilled. Indeed, the economy was not doing well. So the physiological needs were not taken care of, fulfilled. And then as a response to the 9/11, Americans felt that their safety needs were fulfilled. So his approval rating rose greatly. But once this passed, eventually the economy stayed the same. So the physiological was still not fulfilled, which ended up with him not being reelected. So as a conclusion, I would say that the public opinion is volatile and they only require the basic needs fulfilled to be contented, and then they will give full trust to the government. Yes.
Okay, good. That's interesting. I'm impressed with the reference to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because I talk about that too in my classes. And so thank you very much. Well, I'm not going to share my screen because this is a nice screen, and I appreciate you, using it. I would like to just continue to use your screen and your image there to highlight how Americans typically, are not like us. In the time remaining that I have here, to highlight that Americans are typically not like the kind of people like you and me that take U.S. foreign policy class, go to college, speak multiple languages, and go to South Korea as an exchange student. Most people in America are concerned about their nation, but they have very little knowledge about their nation. They have impressions of their nation, even though they have very little detailed information about their nation or about international affairs and the role of their nation in the world. But they're still very much American self-identifiers. So one of the ways by which Americans tend to evaluate their condition and their beliefs about the well-being of the United States and the performance of the president and the other congressional leaders and the senior members of the government is, do they believe America's direction is in a good one or not? I mean, public opinion survey analysts, they know everything we're talking about here, that people do not have lots of information. Most people don't pay lots of attention. Most people feel strongly American, even though they don't have much information or pay much attention to world affairs, that they're concerned about their day-to-day lives. They're concerned about economic prospects. But at the same time, they understand that they have an understanding or belief that their own individual well-being is somehow connected to the well-being of this thing called the United States of America. So what public opinion survey poll people will do is they will ask Americans, do you believe the direction of the economy, the direction of the country is good? Is the future of the country doing well? Are we on the right path? Is the direction of the economy a favorable one or unfavorable one? Is it a good one or a negative one? And that way you capture the identification of people with their nation, with their own emotional sense of what they're experiencing, which they then project on the president. In the American nation state, as you highlighted, America is nationalistic. People tend to equate, not everybody, but people tend to equate the nation with the government with the state as represented by the government apparatus and the people in it. So the president is more than just, as I said, he's more than just a chief executive officer. He's the big papa and the big abuji. I'm exaggerating, of course, but he's the embodiment of the American state. And if the people will tend to blame the leadership for their fears or give credit for their hopes and beliefs in the future to the people that are at the top of the hierarchy of power, the power in the United States. Even if that person who's at the top of that system really can't do much or have much impact on the structures of power. So as we mentioned earlier, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden have been unable to reduce the size of the US military because of the political consequences of that, and all of the millions of people whose jobs and incomes and business investments and business plans as suppliers to the military are connected with that vast military industrial government complex. Right. So, but the point is, people still have a view. Even if they know very little about what's going on in the world, they will still have an impression. They will still have an emotional feeling, very often not very well informed about the direction of the country, and they will give you an explanation for that, but that will have also some kind of relationship to of their views about foreign affairs, right? The fact, if somebody is unhappy with Joe Biden and you ask them, is the direction of the country good or bad? And they might say, well, I'm not too optimistic about the future. And you say, why? What happened that makes you feel that way? They will give you an answer because they want to look like they're intelligent. So they'll give you an answer. They're not going to go, I don't know. They're going to say something, and they might say, oh, I saw in Kabul what happened, how the Americans left Kabul yesterday. Oh, Afghanistan. So again, the question is, do public opinion surveys have an impact on American foreign policy? And I think they do, because American politicians, professional politicians, know everything that we're talking about here. So they frame their foreign policy behavior in ways in relationship to their effort to get reelected. And that means to make Americans feel confident or happy, enough Americans, sufficient Americans to feel confident or happy about the direction of the country, domestically and in the world. And that will affect the government's behavior, obviously, internationally. By the way, you can ask questions if you want to as well. All right, anybody, if you want to during the debate, and get maybe a little extra credit. So I will stop there, and I will now ask Anais to rebut and conclude for 7 minutes.
Oh, I have to talk 7 minutes now?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, while I think that lobby groups actually have more power than the private citizens in both on the government and on the public. So I want to give an example of the Christian evangelicalism. First of all, it makes up for 30 to 40% of this population. And as a proof of the power is what's written in the right, "In God we trust," which is actually the official motto of the United States. And you can also find it on both billed and post stamps. In addition to this, the president have personal evangelists counseling them spiritually. So they have a direct influence on the president, who is at the top of the hierarchy. So nowadays we have seen that they have a fear, they fear the loss of their identity, which resulted in the anti-abortion law in Texas. And since the 1960s, they think that they are being bullied by the governments, because since then they have the government removed religions from the public school. So they removed the Bible and the singing in the classroom. And in addition to this, the government focused on developing diverse nations. So in reaction to this, the Christian evangelicalism want to have Christian laws to keep their heritage. So I would like to, for example, mention that a Christian church actually refused to operate on the gender change operation, as it goes against their values. And I believe that President Trump knew how to use all of those points. So first of all, I'm gonna go back a bit on the manipulation, which are a bit specifically for Trump this time. So he managed to focus the population back on domestic politics, and he was able to satisfy them on that matter. So once again, the basic needs, which as a result gave him more freedom to act on the foreign policies, even though he had no knowledge of it. So it led him to retreat from many international treaties, especially, for example, Asian treaties in which Asian countries had actually paid for. And the Americans never didn't publicly complain about the removal from those treaties. So secondly, he won with important support from the Christian evangelicalism, despite having many rumors conflicting the Christian values, such as affairs and divorce. I would like to quickly note that President W. Bush also won the election with their support. So President Trump touched them with his values, so because they felt like they share the same values, such as "Make America Great Again." So it would mean that going back on the Christian heritage that went on for so long, and focusing back on the domestic policies once again, not the foreign ones. So I would like to finish with a comparison with Switzerland's importance of public opinions, which is my country. So first of all, I would like to mention that, of course, the scale is different because Switzerland only has 8.2 million inhabitants, and the GDP is $752 billion versus the United States one is of 21 trillion American dollars. So yeah, as you can see, it's really different, but I thought it was interesting to compare from what I know. So first of all, Switzerland has an army neutrality. So in comparison to the very important and powerful American army, they would have different ways to react. Like the people expect different things from the government. Secondly, the Switzerland has developed a high level of direct democracy by Rousseau, which actually on the right, you can see a photo of his statue in Switzerland because he actually lived there for some time. So his theory was that every citizen has equal responsibility, to agree on laws that govern them. So while his speech shocked Switzerland at the time, we cannot deny now that he has a huge influence on today's Swiss politics. Indeed, most adult Swiss citizens nowadays regularly vote on both domestic and foreign matters. So as for example, we voted that we didn't want to be part of the European Union. And most recently, just before I left for South Korea, actually, we voted in favor of trade with Indonesia. So as you can see, we also have a lot to say on foreign policy matters. And lastly, we have a percentage of 25% of immigrants, which is more than America, the United States does. And so which increases our interest and awareness on foreign policy. And this will benefit citizens with prosperity and knowledge. So this is what I have.
Okay, I think I will focus on the role of elites as well also. I mean, but again, I think we can all accept that politicians in Switzerland and the United States and in Korea, that they are, and in Belgium, that they are thinking about how are the voters feeling about their performance. And particularly on as the election approaches, how are voters coming to a determination about how to vote in the election. And so you get an indication, I think it's obvious that you get an indication of how voters are feeling about the performance of me, the President of the United States, or you, the chairman of the Federal Council in Switzerland, or as the Prime Minister of Belgium. You're thinking about how are the voters thinking about viewing me? What are their impressions? Not even thinking, do they like me or not? Do they like how I'm doing or not? And what you have that you can get pretty quickly as an estimation of the general view of the Belgians or the Swiss or the Americans or the Koreans is a public opinion survey that's done scientifically, that's with a truly representative random sample. Everything that you study when you do public opinion surveys, you have to, in order to do it to come up with a valid, accurate sample that represents the 160 million voters or more, well, 200 million voters in the United States, or the 25 million voters in Belgium, and so on. Okay, now, of course, those public opinion survey results are going to affect foreign policy. They might not affect what somebody wants to do ultimately, but they will certainly affect how he or she as the president tries to do it. Because they have to, like Seymour Martin Lipset said, he perhaps overstated that in his comment. He said, Americans, that a president should be able to do what he wants to do. Public opinion surveys indicate his effectiveness as a politician. But let's not underestimate the importance of being an effective politician. If you are an ineffective politician, you make conflicts worse. You generate more crises. You cause more reactions. Like, for example, if Joe Biden, he wanted to get out of Afghanistan. Okay, so he got us out of Afghanistan. Apparently, the intelligence reports he was getting did not indicate that the Kabul government would just disappear in 7 days. It did. Now, you know that's going to increase the Republicans' performance in the next elections, in next year for the Congress, and in 3 years for the presidency. And that can have really strong implications, not only for Americans, but for you Koreans, and you Swiss, and you Belgians, if, say, Donald Trump comes back into office, or somebody like Trump comes back into office because Joe Biden looks like he's not particularly competent. And that foreign policy event was one element, but that's a really powerful event because even though, as I said, Americans do not have close attention, generally speaking, close attention to politics, they are still strongly impacted by their sense of, is America looking proud and effective and influential in the world? Or does it look like it was a defeated bad power that had to run away from Afghanistan? And people can have views about that, even though they know nothing about Afghanistan. And they will have views about it because they're American nationalists. So, and in terms of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, I mean, of course, politicians and presidents and others focus upon intellectuals, elites. So Joe Biden is always communicating with editors and newspaper journalists and influential policy analysis institutes, so-called think tanks, or celebrities, sports figures. But ultimately, they want to see the impact. They will evaluate the impact of those consultations with professors and journalists and editors and think tanks and other Congress and other political elites in terms of its impact on public opinion and public opinion surveys that are tracked over time. They're not just looking at one, they're looking at what happened 6 months ago, how popular was I 6 months ago, 5 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, a week ago, and what can I do to make sure that those trends go in a positive direction? So I think it's obvious. It's obvious that public opinion in the form of public opinion polls are important for shaping how America behaves. It might not affect the ultimate goals. And I think Hans Morgenthau would say that, right? Hans Morgenthau would say, all states try to expand if they see an opportunity to expand their influence. It doesn't matter if it's the United States or the Soviet Union or People's Republic of China, they will attempt to expand their influence. They'll do it in different ways because there's an American way of doing these things and deciding these things, and there's a Chinese way and there's a Russian way, but they will expand, sure. But how they go about doing it can produce crises, can produce disasters, can produce surprises, and a surprise is a crisis, right? So, and let's not underestimate the importance of being a skilled tactical politician. Apparently, Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon, they get credit for being effective tactical politicians. Donald Trump, I don't think he had any kind of tactical plans at all. He was just a populist entertainer trying to get public opinion approval ratings. He is all about public opinion approval ratings. Donald Trump was all about that. Right? That's all that counted for him. Like it's a television show getting viewerships from rankings from the public opinion survey ratings for television shows, and it had a big impact on American foreign policy, even if it didn't fundamentally change it yet. Okay, so anybody have any questions? If not, let's go back to, thank you very much. And so applause to Anais for her notable performance. And so let's now go to the vote on the share screen for the debate. And so we go to vote. And so, did I win? Did I win? Did I win? Everybody, please vote on this topic. Oh, no. No, 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 no. I only got 2 votes. I'm not voting, of course. I'm not voting. Oh, I thought I won. I thought I won. I'm so distraught. Okay. So let me stop. stop the share and show you my reaction. And I never get to use that emoticon very much, so I wanted to use it here. So let's now go to the next item on the share screen, and that is to grade the debate. And so we go to vote, and so please grade the debate. And this is anonymous. This is anonymous. So please grade the debate. And those of you who, of course, have to do the debate, you know, of course, you can always learn from and borrow ideas, best practices from other people. So that was a nice PowerPoint presentation. And okay, so I guess that's the time for that. So we've got a few minutes left in the class. So let me go back and see what else is there in terms of the vote. I think that's it for voting today. Yeah. So let me go back then to the notes and show you what else is going on in terms of public opinion and what else I want to highlight. I think one of the things I want to highlight is this challenge of trying to conceptualize social media. I mean, this is happening at such a rapid pace in terms of the impact of social media on public opinion, that it is a topic that is we need to do serious research on, because it's definitely part of this polarization in American society and the impact of for-profit media in a splintering, fragmented, infinitely fragmented media environment. Because now, as I said, there's literally an infinite sources of information that are so-called news that people can pick and choose to consume, that is contributing to this polarization of American public opinion. And it is pointing to a crisis period point in which I think we're going to see some moves towards a regulation of social media because of the pathologies that emerge in society as a result of the intense polarization. So where this is going is a topic that needs to be analyzed, and it's a topic which I think I am going to spend a lot of time, and I am working on it as well, with deadlines. Like I told you, I have to write papers too, just like you do. So I got deadlines coming up, and I'm trying to write on these topics. And it's certainly an exciting time to be studying foreign policy and politics and international relations. So you and I are living at I think an amazing time, with COVID-19 pandemic really kicking off a period of momentous change in the world, with because one of the impacts of global climate change is that it's going to amplify and intensify the frequency of crises and their intensity, because of the economic stresses, the dislocations, and the political reactions to the greater economic stresses and social polarizations around those increasing evident impact of the inexorable fact of global interdependency, right? So we are at a critical time in our history, and so Anais did a good job of highlighting this picture of American public opinion. And so, what role should public opinion play in foreign policy? There's a delegate model that elected politicians should reflect the wishes of their constituents and sort of be like mouthpieces for the aggregated wishes of their constituents as aggregated through, public opinion surveys, for example, right? What do your voters want in your district, or as president, what do the American people want? Well, do a public opinion survey, find out what they want. Ask them a question and find out the response, and do what the majority of the voters want, and you're doing the will of the people. Versus the delegate model, the trustee model, that you elect me and you expect me to use my judgment to do what is best as the trustee that you give an authority to carry out American or Swiss or Belgian or a Korean foreign policy. And the best theorist for this is, of course, Edmund Burke. He's the most important theorist in the English language for defending and promoting conservative political ideology. He's the most influential conservative ideologist in Anglo-Saxon culture and tradition. And so if you're interested in what to do to avoid populism and the dangers of populism, this is somebody you want to, whose work you want to study. And of course, he's writing at a time when Britain is building its global empire. So what can we learn from him in terms of dealing with American hegemony in the world? So I think that's where we have to stop. Does anybody have any questions? If not, that's it. So I will have an update for you what the rest of the meeting schedule will be in November, when the word comes down from the Korean government regarding what we're going to do with the social distancing requirements. But I won't know until it's posted on that website, right, that I've been referencing. So, but I'll let you know over email. Okay, bye.